Hi. Well, just want to say something, just a few short words about one of the most famous composers and pianists, Franz Liszt. Franz Liszt lived from 1811 till 1886. He was considered the greatest pianist of his time, probably of all time, and an extremely prolific composer. He was a futurist as a composer, bringing new ideas, new harmonies, and what he did both as a performer and as a composer attracted a lot of younger musicians. In fact, it was referred to as Listomania at that time. As a performer, he was the first really great showman virtuoso as a pianist, but he modeled himself on the person who really was the first showman virtuoso, and that was the violinist Niccolo Paganini. Paganini played the violin in a way that people seriously thought he was in league with the devil to play like that. And Liszt heard him in Paris in 1831. He was absolutely overwhelmed by what he'd heard and seen. Saw for the first time someone who was a great showman in action, so he resolved he was going to do the same as a pianist. So in his performances, which his public performance didn't last really all that long, when you look at his total lifespan. So from the early 1830s to about 1847 was sort of his last public concert, which was, by the way, in Ukraine, that last concert. He never stopped playing, but it was just that he didn't do that kind of touring anymore. But he was a composer during all these years and an innovator, as I said, harmonically and in the area of form. He pretty much invented what's called a symphonic poem, an orchestral piece in one movement. In fact, the one movement design was something that he favored in a good number of his pieces. His piano concertos, I believe there are 10 of them. Every single one of them is in one movement, because the standard thing would be to have it in 3 or maybe 4, or usually 3, but each one is in one movement. His largest single organism as a composition is his sonata in B minor. And sonatas generally, again, had 3 or 4 movements, mostly 3. A long piece, about half hour in length and performance, but it's in one movement. Of course, it has internal divisions, but it's in one continuous movement, so you just really like that. Some of his works, as I say, are quite advanced harmonically for the time. Others are quite simple. And although he was the thundering virtuoso as a performer, and was hysteria, around his performances, that can only be compared to some of the things that some rock stars of today have done. He didn't write only flashy, thundery pieces. Yes, there are many, of course, but there are also many nice, very lyric pieces, beautiful harmonies, and so on. So it's quite a variety. And he wrote over 1,000 compositions. Even today, we don't have an exact count of everything that he wrote. And a couple of things have turned up. At another time, I'm going to speak about something that I was involved with a work of his that was discovered, actually, that I gave one of the very earliest performances of it. That's for another time. Among his many compositions, among the most popular ones are pieces which are called Hungarian Rhapsodies. He wrote 19 of them, and the melodies are basically not of the Hungarians per se, but of the Roma, or they used to be called gypsies, who lived there. Came more from their music. And harmonically, they're quite simple, and they're sectional in form. They usually have a section that's like an improvisation. It's called the lasan, and because that improvisation was an important part of the music of the Roma, but it always would finish in what's called the frischka, a quick dance at the end, supported by very simple harmonies. And they're among the most attractive and popular of Liszt's compositions. And again, I said he wrote 19 of them. Well, the one called, the second Hungarian Rhapsody, number 2, is extremely well known. It's really his most famous piece, and I think almost everyone would recognize it. It's been arranged in different directions, but I think many of us would associate this with Tom and Jerry cartoons, because it's featured in one, really funny one, and I know that most everybody would recognize the second Hungarian Rhapsody. You're going to hear a performance of it, a performance that I did, when was it, 2022, yeah, so 2 years ago. It's a performance, it was a concert in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, which is very near Pittsburgh. It was a Ukrainian event, and I played the Hungarian Rhapsody number 2 there. So the performance you're going to hear is that performance. Liszt's most famous composition, and an excellent example of that extroverted virtuoso style that spawned other performers and composers to play and write pieces of that kind throughout the rest of the 19th century and into the 20th century, what I call the golden age of virtuosity. So I hope you enjoy the performance of the famous Second Hungarian Rhapsody by Franz Liszt.